It wasn't supposed to happen, not between us. She was older, wiser, and carried the kind of silence that made you want to listen. I never meant to fall for her eyes, her stillness, or the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. But sometimes, connection doesn't ask for permission, it just finds you, quietly, when you're not ready. This isn't a love story in the usual sense. It's about timing, restraint, and the spaces between words, where the real feelings live. I didn't expect her to be there that late, not with the rain slapping the windows and the smell of motor oil still hanging in the air. Most people don't come to the shop after hours. But that night, when I unlocked the back door to grab my forgotten jacket, she was standing there, right in the narrow yellow light that leaked from the ceiling bulb. She didn't move at first. Just looked at me, like she'd been waiting for me to notice her. Her name was Sarah, though everyone called her Ms. Hale. She brought her car in once a week, always something small. A loose belt. A sound that didn't feel right. I'd started to think maybe nothing was wrong with the car. Maybe it was something else. She was in her 40s, maybe older, but there was a calmness to her that made everything around her slow down. She had that kind of confidence you don't learn young, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, but somehow takes it anyway. When she spoke, her voice was low, steady. "You left your wrench in the front seat again," she said, lifting it with 2 fingers. "Figured I'd drop it off." I could have sworn her hand brushed mine when she passed it over. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just me. I muttered a thank you, but my voice cracked halfway through. She smiled, not the polite kind people give when they want to leave, but the kind that lingers. The kind that says, "I saw that." Behind her, the rain made the glass shimmer. She turned and closed the door softly, the way you do when you don't want a moment to end too fast. Then she walked past the counter and to the window blinds, pulling the thin curtains shut one by one. It felt strange, her moving around my workspace like she belonged there. But I didn't stop her. When she turned back, she said quietly, "You shouldn't leave the lights on when it rains like this. Makes the place look lonely." I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe because she was right. The shop did look lonely, cold walls, half-fixed engines, the hum of a single fan in the corner. I'd spent so many nights here alone, I'd stopped noticing how empty it felt. Until now. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, studying me. Not in a judgmental way, more like she was measuring the distance between what I said and what I meant. "So," she said finally, "how's the car holding up?" "Fine," I said. Too quickly. Her eyebrow lifted. "Fine?" "Yeah, I checked the brakes this morning." She smiled again, slow this time. "You're not very good at small talk, are you?" "I'm better with engines," I said. "I can tell." There was something in her tone, not flirtation, not yet. Something quieter, heavier. Like a thought she wasn't ready to say out loud. I could feel my heartbeat where my hands rested on the counter. For a second, either of us moved. The fan clicked once, twice. Her eyes didn't leave mine. Then she stepped closer, not enough to touch, but close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Something faintly floral, and warm. "Next time," she said softly, "don't forget your jacket." And with that, she turned, pulled the curtain aside just enough to slip through the door, and disappeared into the sound of the rain. I stood there for a long time after. The wrench still cold in my hand, her voice replaying in my head, over and over, like it was trying to tell me something I hadn't understood yet. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head. Like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. It had been 3 days since that night. I told myself she probably wouldn't come back, that maybe I'd imagined the weight in her voice, the small flicker in her eyes. But on Thursday afternoon, her car rolled in again. Same quiet hum, same silver sedan that always seemed cleaner than the rest. She parked like she always did, perfectly centered, cautious, and when she stepped out, she was wearing a long beige coat and sunglasses even though the sky was gray. "Something's rattling again," she said, glancing toward the hood. "Can you take a look?" Her tone was light, but her fingers twisted the strap of her bag in small, nervous circles. Sure, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. You can wait inside. She nodded and followed me, the click of her heels sounding too sharp against the quiet of the shop. When I opened the hood, I already knew there was no rattle, at least, not one I could find. But I checked anyway. I could feel her watching from behind, leaning against the counter. I caught her reflection in the metal, her arms crossed, shoulders tense, a faint frown tugging at her mouth. You've been busy, she said after a while. Yeah, I lied. Sort of. Sort of? I shrugged. Mostly just keeping the lights on. She laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because she understood. It was the kind of sound that felt unguarded, like a breath she forgot to control. When I looked up, she was staring at the floor, her hand resting against her neck. Her nails were short, clean. The veins on the back of her hand stood out faintly, delicate but strong. I don't know why that detail caught me. Maybe because it made her seem real. Human. After a long pause, she said quietly, You ever feel like you're stuck in the same day over and over? The question caught me off guard. Yeah, I said. Every morning, when I start the same engines. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. At least your engines listen when you fix them. There was something in her voice then, not sadness exactly, but something pressed down, contained. I wanted to ask what she meant. Who she meant. But she was already straightening her coat, pulling the mask of composure back into place. Did you find it? She asked. Not yet, I said. Could be the frame vibrating. I'll check underneath. She nodded, and for a moment she crouched beside me as I slid under the car. Her hand steadied the flashlight, but her grip trembled, just slightly. You okay? I asked. She blinked. I'm fine. Just. She stopped, the word hanging in the air like she wasn't sure where to put it. When I came out from under the car, she was looking at the rain outside again, her face unreadable. You should take tomorrow off, I said. Let me finish this. She turned, her expression softening, almost grateful. Then, without warning, she said, You remind me of someone. I waited, but she didn't say who. Instead, she reached for her keys, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and gave a small, practiced smile. As she walked toward the door, she hesitated, just once, and looked back. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't. And that silence felt louder than words. The rain came harder that night, the kind that makes the streetlights blur, and the air smell like metal. I'd just finished closing up the shop when her car pulled in, wipers beating frantically, headlights cutting through the gray. She didn't step out right away. Just sat there, engine running, until I walked over and tapped lightly on her window. She rolled it down, eyes rimmed with tiredness. I shouldn't be here, she said. Then why are you? Her lips pressed together, and she gave a small, helpless shake of her head. The car started making that sound again. Of course it did, I murmured. We both knew that wasn't the reason. I opened the bay door and waved her in. The rain echoed against the metal roof as she parked. Her coat was soaked, strands of hair clinging to her face. I handed her a towel, and she took it with a small laugh, half embarrassed, half something else. Thanks, she said quietly, drying her hands. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Coming here at this hour. Not really, I said. You trust me with your car. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a heartbeat too long, either of us looked away. She exhaled and walked toward the workbench, running her hand across a row of dusty tools. You're too young to sound that sure of yourself. Maybe I just don't have much to lose. She turned slightly, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting across her lips. That's what you think now. The lights flickered from the storm. We both looked up, anything to break the silence pressing between us. Do you ever feel like... She began, then stopped. Never mind. What? I asked. She hesitated, fingers tightening on the towel. Like you stepped into something you shouldn't have. But you can't make yourself step back. Her words hit somewhere deep, though she didn't look at me when she said them. I think everyone feels that, I said softly. Some just admit it sooner. That made her laugh, a real laugh this time. But it faded almost instantly when her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a name, Mark. She stared at it, unmoving. Want me to give you a minute? I asked. She shook her head. No. He'll think I'm busy. The way she said busy sounded heavier than it should have. Like it meant tired of him, or tired of explaining. I leaned against the work table, close enough to smell the faint citrus in her hair. She didn't move away. If anything, she stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine as she reached for a wrench she didn't need. Do you ever fix anything that's not broken? I asked, voice low. Her hand froze midair. She turned, and for the first time, I saw something unguarded flicker across her face, fear, maybe, or longing, or both. Sometimes, she whispered. But it never stays fixed. The storm cracked outside, a hard, sudden clap that made us both flinch. Her phone buzzed again, the name still glowing. Her hand trembled as she picked it up, thumb hovering over the screen. She didn't answer. The silence stretched thin, fragile. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, almost under her breath, You should go now. And I did. But only my body left that room. It had been almost a week since that storm, and I thought maybe she wouldn't come back this time. I told myself that was for the best, but every time the door opened, my heart still lifted before it fell again. Then, one evening, just as I was sweeping up, she walked in. No car this time. Just her. The door shut behind her with a soft click, and the sound felt too final. She wasn't wearing her usual coat, just a dark sweater, sleeves pushed to her elbows, like she'd come straight from somewhere else and hadn't planned this. I was nearby, she said, her voice thinner than usual. Thought I'd check on the car. It's fine, I said quietly. Has been for days. I know. She stood there, unsure what to do with her hands, then walked over to the counter where she'd stood before. The air between us felt heavier now, like something had already been decided, and neither of us had agreed to it out loud. You've been avoiding me, she said finally. I looked up. Have I? You stopped calling about the car. You used to check in. I figured you'd call if something was wrong. Her laugh was small, almost brittle. That's the thing, isn't it? Something is wrong. The words hung there, not loud, not sharp, just true. She leaned against the counter, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. You think I don't know what this is? I don't think it is anything, I said too quickly. She smiled at that, a quiet, painful kind of smile. Exactly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the things we weren't saying, full of the moments that had built up like dust we couldn't brush away. Outside, the sun had already dipped, and the shop filled with that blue hour light that makes everything look softer and more fragile. I keep asking myself, she said after a while, what are we doing? Her voice cracked on the last word, so lightly I almost missed it. I don't know, I said honestly. I just know it feels like something I can't undo. She turned to face me then, and her eyes looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from holding too much inside. You're young, she whispered. You'll forget this. I don't think I will. She exhaled through her nose, shaking her head. That's the problem. For a long time, neither of us moved. There was no storm this time, no thunder, no phone ringing to save us from ourselves. Just the hum of the lights, and the sound of her breath catching in the quiet. When I finally stepped closer, she didn't step back. But she didn't reach for me either. Her hand rested on the counter, open, waiting, almost. Say something, I whispered. She looked at me then, really looked, and the silence between us turned sharp. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. She came in on a Friday, just before closing. The same door chime, the same faint smell of rain still clinging to her coat. But something was different, quieter, heavier. She didn't look like she'd come for the car this time. Can we talk? she asked. I nodded and turned off the radio. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just careful. She walked to the workbench and set down her purse. Then, almost like she was afraid to break something invisible, she pulled out an old photo, edges worn, colors fading into yellow. It was of a man, maybe late 30s, standing beside a different car, a smile that looked too easy. He had the kind of posture people have before life starts taking things away from them. "This was my husband," she said. "Mark." The same name that used to light up her phone. "He died 3 years ago," she continued, her voice low, deliberate. "Heart attack. In the driveway." She didn't look at me when she said it. She stared at the photo like she was trying to memorize it again, as if the act of remembering still hurt. "I used to think if I stayed busy enough, if I fixed enough small things, maybe the big one wouldn't feel so broken." I stayed quiet. Words didn't feel like the right language for that kind of honesty. She set the photo down gently and gave a half smile, the kind people give when they know they're being seen too closely. "You remind me of him sometimes." The air changed after that. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loud. I could feel the weight of what she'd said settling between us like dust in sunlight, quiet but impossible to ignore. "Same look," she added. "That mix of curiosity and sadness. He used to stare at me like he was trying to understand something he couldn't name." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt dry, like words would only come out wrong. She leaned against the counter, her hands trembling just slightly. "I don't know why I keep coming here," she said, her voice softening. "Maybe I wanted to remember how it felt to be looked at like that again. Or maybe I just wanted to feel seen." That word, seen, hit deeper than anything else. I took a step closer. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. "Not to me." Her eyes lifted then, finally meeting mine. There wasn't guilt there, or confusion, just a fragile kind of release, like she'd finally stopped holding her breath after years of pretending she didn't need air. "I didn't mean to make this complicated," she whispered. "You didn't," I said. "It already was." For a moment we stood there, the hum of the light above us, the smell of oil and rain, the faint ticking of the clock. And then she took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. It happened quietly, not like a confession, not like a storm breaking. More like something that had been leaning too long finally deciding to fall. She came by late again, after closing. I didn't ask why anymore. We'd stopped pretending there were reasons for these visits. Some things don't need reasons, they just happen, the way light finds its way through cracks. The shop was dim, half lit by the single bulb over the counter. I was sitting there with a mug of coffee gone cold when she walked in. She didn't bother to speak, she just took off her coat and set it down, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You shouldn't keep the lights on this late," she murmured, half smiling. "Someone will think you're waiting for something." "Maybe I am," I said. She looked at me for a long time, and for once, she didn't deflect. She didn't hide behind small talk or polite jokes. The silence stretched, not awkward but full, warm. She came closer, her steps slow, deliberate. When she stopped in front of me, I could see the faint lines near her eyes, not age, but history. She smelled faintly of rain again, and something floral beneath it, like the memory of a summer she'd once lived. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said, about things that can't be undone." I nodded. My throat was too tight for words. "I don't know what this is," she continued, "and I'm not sure I should." Her voice trembled just slightly. "But I'm tired of pretending it isn't something." She sat down beside me, the old wooden stool creaking beneath her. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the faint hum of the fluorescent light and her breathing, slow, uneven, real. I turned toward her. She didn't move away. "You don't have to explain," I said again. "We don't have to call it anything." Her eyes softened, a faint shimmer catching the light. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I said. "It's just honest." Her hand was resting on her knee, fingers slightly curled, the faintest tremor running through them. Without thinking, I reached out, not to hold it, not to claim it, just to still it. My fingertips brushed her skin. She didn't pull away. We stayed like that, either of us speaking, either of us daring to move. Outside, the rain began again, tapping lightly against the window, like it wanted to remind us that the world was still turning, even if we weren't. She leaned forward then, resting her forehead against my shoulder. No words, no promises, just that, a small, quiet surrender. I closed my eyes and let the moment breathe. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't even feel like happiness. It felt real, like two people finally standing still in the truth they'd been circling for weeks. When she finally pulled back, her eyes met mine, calm, unguarded, almost peaceful. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down. And that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. It's been months now. The shop looks different in the mornings, cleaner somehow, quieter. Maybe it's just me who's changed, or maybe it's the way memory alters light when you look at it too long. Sarah doesn't come by anymore. Not for her car, not for coffee, not even for those long, wordless evenings where silence said more than either of us dared to. But she left things behind, not the kind you can touch, not the kind you can throw away. Small traces, invisible but permanent. I still catch myself looking at the door around closing time, like part of me expects it to open again. Like she might walk in, brush the rain from her coat, and say something simple, something that means everything, like, "You forgot your wrench again." But she doesn't. And I think that's okay now. Back then, I thought love was supposed to be loud, something that declared itself in bright, unmissable ways. But she showed me that sometimes, the quietest things leave the deepest marks. She once told me she didn't know what this was. I didn't either. I still don't. But I know what it did. It made me see differently. It made me listen, not just to her voice, but to the space between her words. When you're young, you think connection has to make sense, has to fit some story you can explain. But what I learned with her was that the things that matter most often don't. They just happen, and you live inside them for a while, until you can't anymore. I still remember that last night, the way her hand felt when she finally let it rest against mine. The quiet in her eyes when she stopped pretending she wasn't tired of being strong all the time. She never said she loved me. And maybe that's why it still feels real. Because love, when it's honest, doesn't need to say much. It just is. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about me when the rain hits her windows. If she ever stops herself from driving past the shop, just to see if the lights are still on. And sometimes, when I lock up and the street is empty, I swear I can still hear her voice, low, calm, unhurried, reminding me to turn the lights off before it gets too late. I didn't just fall for an older woman. I fell into something rare, something true. And I hope, if you're listening, you find something like that too.